Have you ever witnessed a moment so outrageous, so brimming with prejudice, that it left an entire crowd speechless? On a busy Monday morning at the departure gate of an international airport, a confident black woman in an immaculate power suit was treated like a criminal by a skeptical airline manager. Her identification was doubted, her dignity questioned, and the whispers of onlookers swelled with suspicion. Yet beneath the surface lay a remarkable secret that no one least of all the manager saw coming. Strap in for a jaw-dropping journey of drama, betrayal, and unlikely twists. This story will leave you rethinking everything you know about power, privilege, and identity. A chilly breeze skimmed across the tarmac of the bustling Chicago O'Hare International Airport, where flights arrived and departed in a seamless ballet of aircraft steel. It was early morning, and the terminal was swamped with travelers juggling suitcases, passports, and the pressure to make it to their gates on time. Children cried, security lines stretched for miles, and announcements crackled overhead, layering the day with an inescapable hum of chaos. The star of our story was a poised black woman named Ruby Anderson. At first glance, she looked like any other busy professional. She wore a sharp navy blue pantsuit, neither gaudy nor understated, perfectly tailored to her athletic yet curvaceous frame. Her black hair was swept back into a sleek chignon, and a delicate watch adorned her wrist. She clutched a slim black leather briefcase, her posture radiating dignity. If anyone bothered to look closely, they'd notice the signet ring on her finger, a small but significant emblem of her family's proud legacy. Yet, in an airport teeming with thousands, she was just another face among many. Also, stepping onto the airport concourse was Jared Hilton, an airline manager for Transway Airlines. Jared was a man who prided himself on running a tight ship. He had built his reputation on a stubborn adherence to rules, sometimes to the point of arrogance. Thick-set and quick to assert authority, he often scanned the crowd for any whiff of irregularities. He had been commended by his superiors in the past for identifying fraudulent IDs, suspicious travelers, and vulnerabilities. Behind the veneer of vigilance, however, lurked a man who was quick to judge, armed with preconceived notions about who belonged in first class, which demographic was more likely to commit fraud, and whose claims of status or influence were genuine. That Monday morning, fate and prejudice lined up in a way that set the stage for extraordinary consequences. Ruby made her way toward the check-in desk for her flight to London, exuding the quiet self-confidence of someone who was used to boardroom negotiations and high-stakes deals. She approached the first-class check-in counter, politely slid her ID across, and asked for her boarding pass. Everything about her manner indicated an experienced traveler, someone who had done this countless times before. Jared Hilton, who happened to be standing behind the desk, eyed the photograph on the ID, then eyed Ruby. Something in him flashed with suspicion, as if an internal alarm had just blared that something was off, though in reality it was only his own bias. She was alone, carrying a single bag and traveling first class. Jared's mind whirred. Does she really belong here? He flicked his gaze from the ID to Ruby and back again, uttering in a monotone voice, "Just a moment, I need to verify some details." Despite his outward politeness, the skepticism laced his words. Ruby, accustomed to more respectful greetings, arched an eyebrow but maintained her cool composure. She offered a polite smile, not realizing this was only the beginning of an ordeal that would rapidly spiral out of control. Jared tapped on his computer keyboard with growing annoyance, as if searching for evidence to validate his suspicion. He paused to call over a junior associate, who looked equally perplexed. Over the next several minutes, Ruby stood there with an air of patient dignity, while travelers behind her grew restless. She was used to waiting. Her entire career had taught her that patience was a rare and priceless virtue. However, she noticed with mild concern that Jared kept eyeing her ID photo as if it were a puzzle missing half its pieces. "Is there a problem?" she inquired in a polite tone. Jared cleared his throat. "We, need additional verification," he said, conveniently leaving out any specific reason. He gestured to the ID. "Do you have a second piece of ID, or maybe a corporate ID badge from your place of work?" It was an unusual request. Normally a passport and a driver's license would suffice. Yet Ruby complied, presenting her driver's license along with a business card that sported her corporate title, CEO and President, Oakwood Innovations, an international technology consulting firm. Though not as instantly recognizable as behemoths like Apple or Amazon, Oakwood Innovations was, in fact, Fortune 500 listed, an incredible accomplishment for a company only 15 years old. Ruby had been at the helm for 5 of those years, steering the firm to unprecedented growth and philanthropic endeavors, especially within marginalized communities. When Jared glimpsed the card, a faint sneer marred his features. He let out a small, disbelieving snort, as though mocking the possibility that she could hold such a title. He typed something on the screen, pressed enter, and then typed again, faster this time, feeding his internal narrative that something was amiss. The tension thickened in the air. The travelers waiting behind Ruby were beginning to stare. A few had curious expressions, while others showed sympathy. Some expressed impatience, but no one dared to openly question Jared's motives. Why risk making a scene at the airport? Ruby swallowed her frustration and spoke firmly but calmly. "If there's an issue, may I speak to a supervisor? My flight boards soon, and I do have urgent business in London." Jared's eyes narrowed. "I am the manager," he declared, the unspoken challenge clear in his tone. "We have to make sure everything is legitimate before we issue your boarding pass. There are strict airline policies regarding first-class tickets purchased with corporate accounts." The insinuation wasn't lost on Ruby. She had encountered discrimination in various, sometimes subtle, forms throughout her career, but this felt brazen. Even so, she didn't want to exacerbate the situation. "I understand," she replied curtly, "but perhaps I can help clarify anything that you might find suspicious." Jared paused. He was unaccustomed to someone so polite yet self-assured, especially a black woman traveling alone in first class. A flicker of resentment crossed his face, perhaps envy of her poised confidence. But his response was measured, as though he was addressing a minor annoyance. "Let's step over here for a more thorough check," he said, gesturing to a side hallway near the check-in counter. Ruby's jaw tensed slightly. She noted the sideways glances from onlookers, the hush in the crowd that often precedes an impending confrontation. Yet she gathered her composure and followed Jared to the corridor. Some watchers shook their heads. A middle-aged couple whispered to each other about how frequently these types of incidents happened, lamenting that even in the modern era, judgments were often made at face value. Among them was a young, aspiring journalist named Lucas, who discreetly pulled out his phone, ready to capture whatever happened next. He could sense that something bigger was about to unfold. The corridor behind the check-in counters was lit by sterile fluorescent lights, the walls painted in dull tones of white. It was typically used for employees to pass in and out of restricted areas. In the stark quiet of this hallway, the tension was even more palpable. Jared turned to face Ruby, squaring his shoulders. "I need to see the credit card used to purchase this ticket," he insisted. "And I need a form of employment verification. Just having a business card doesn't confirm you're a CEO." Ruby gave him a measured look, her patience wearing thin. "I purchased the ticket through my corporate travel department," she replied. "I can show you the corporate card used, but are you asking every passenger with a corporate account to produce the same, or is this just me?" The question hung in the air like a silent challenge. Jared's lips tightened into a thin line. For a second, he seemed taken aback by her directness. Then he doubled down. It's standard procedure when something about the traveler or the booking raises questions. And what's raising questions? Ruby asked, in a tone that was calm yet edged with steel. She could feel her heart hammering, not from fear, but from the anger that threatened to bubble over. She had rarely let her emotions get the better of her in a professional setting, having navigated boardrooms filled with condescending stares and subtle insinuations for years. But there was something about this public display of skepticism that made her blood simmer. Jared pressed his lips together, ignoring the question. "I also noticed you have a US passport and a separate state driver's license. Some details here don't match perfectly." He pointed to an inconsequential difference in how her name was displayed. Ruby J. Anderson in one document versus Ruby Anderson in another. A middle initial. That was all. But he acted as though he had found a glaring red flag. "That's not unusual," Ruby stated, controlling her exasperation. "My passport has my middle initial, while some other IDs omit it." "This is extremely common." Jared feigned a shrug, as if unconvinced. "We still have to do our due diligence." Ruby could see the conversation was spiraling. She knew this was no ordinary security check. This was an interrogation fueled by bias. Her instincts, honed from years in corporate leadership, told her not to raise her voice or appear combative. She took a deep breath and recalled the countless times she'd faced microaggressions. This was hardly her first rodeo. Let's not waste time. How can I prove beyond all doubt that I am who I say I am? Jared paused, seemingly reveling in the power he held to inconvenience her. "We can call the corporation you claim to represent. Would you like to do that now? Let me see your phone." That last request set off alarm bells in Ruby's mind. He was asking to go through her phone under the guise of verifying her identity. That clearly crossed professional boundaries. "I don't believe that's necessary. I can have my travel department speak to you directly. I'll dial them myself." Jared crossed his arms, challenging. "That's acceptable. But we're going to do it at the main security office, not here." This was the moment Ruby realized the confrontation was about to become even more public and humiliating. Yet walking away would mean missing her flight, and that was not an option. With a discreet sigh, she gestured for Jared to lead the way. She noticed him sneering with a certain triumph, as if he had already won something. In that instant, a thought flickered through her mind. I could end all of this in one phone call to senior executives, maybe even get this man fired. But she didn't want to lash out prematurely. She wanted to see this through, to understand exactly how far he would push his authority. Perhaps on a deeper level, she knew that by enduring this experience, she would gain valuable insights into the deeply rooted biases still lurking in so-called professional environments. And that knowledge, she believed, was a weapon she could wield not just for herself, but for many others. While Jared and Ruby headed toward the security office, word of the incident rippled through the waiting area. The few who had witnessed the tense exchange whispered what they'd seen. A white-haired gentleman in a crisp suit shook his head in disapproval, while a mother with 2 young children muttered to her friend that it was blatant discrimination. Social media-savvy travelers pulled out their phones, some quietly lamenting this wasn't the first time they had seen a black passenger singled out unnecessarily. Lucas, the young journalist who'd started recording, followed at a distance. He debated whether to approach them for an impromptu interview. Still in college, he felt compelled to capture the scene. He believed it might highlight ongoing issues of racial profiling. "This might be the story that propels my career," he thought, though he felt a pang of guilt for exploiting another person's discomfort. Nevertheless, he resolved to keep filming discreetly. When they arrived at the security office, Jared introduced Ruby to a uniformed officer named Ben, who was responsible for verifying IDs and traveler documents in questionable cases. Ben looked taken aback when Jared launched into a breathless explanation of why Ruby was highly suspicious. Jared emphasized the mismatch of her name's middle initial, the corporate purchase for a first-class seat, and Ruby's overall demeanor. Ben glanced at Ruby, noticing how professionally she carried herself, how calm and measured her voice was even in the face of this intrusion. He weighed the situation carefully. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Ben. I'm sorry for any inconvenience," he began in a neutral tone. "May I see your documents?" Ruby nodded, feeling a faint sense of relief. At least this man seemed more even-tempered. She handed over her passport, driver's license, and corporate card. As Ben looked them over, he asked, "And you're traveling to London on business?" "Yes," Ruby answered. "I'm heading to attend a technology summit, where I'm one of the keynote speakers." Jared rolled his eyes, drawing Ben's attention. The officer gave Jared a mild look of annoyance, as if silently warning him to remain professional. "And your name is Miss Ruby J. Anderson," he continued, glancing at the passport. That's correct. My driver's license omits the middle initial. I can confirm the last 4 digits of my social security number if that helps. My birth date and address are consistent across all documents." She spoke with clarity, her frustration tamped down for the moment. Ben took a deep breath. "Do you have any additional proof of employment?" "Sometimes we ask for it if someone claims they're traveling for business." His tone was entirely different from Jared's methodical and free of scorn. Ruby pulled out her phone. "I can show you an email from my corporate travel department, or you can speak to my executive assistant. I'll place the call right now." As she dialed, Jared hovered over her shoulder in an imposing manner. Ruby shot him a warning glance that screamed, "Boundaries!" He stepped back, but not before letting out a sigh of impatience. Ruby's call went through. Her assistant, Kelly, answered with a calm, "Good morning, Miss Anderson." Ruby explained the situation succinctly, and Kelly, sounding both appalled and eager to assist, immediately offered to speak to security. Officer Ben took the phone. He stepped aside, speaking quietly. Meanwhile, Jared stayed close, folding his arms defiantly, as though waiting for a triumphant reveal that Ruby was a fraud. Ruby stood composed, meeting his stare without flinching. After a couple of minutes, Ben returned with the phone, handing it back to Ruby. "That all seems to check out," he stated in a matter-of-fact way, offering Ruby a faint apologetic smile. "I don't see any issue with Miss Anderson's documents or her claim to be traveling for business. I believe everything is in order here." His gaze shifted to Jared, who stood there slack-jawed, unwilling to admit an error in judgment. Ben continued gently, "Miss Anderson, please accept our apologies for any inconvenience. You're free to proceed to your flight." She took a moment to exhale, feeling a complex mix of relief and mounting anger. She turned to Jared, offering him a tight smile. "I assume there are no further questions?" Jared's face contorted in frustration. He sputtered a bit, as though searching for some last angle of doubt. Eventually, he merely shrugged, muttered something under his breath, and left the room in a hurry. But the damage was done. He had made a spectacle, and Ruby felt not just personally targeted, but humiliated. As she headed back into the main concourse, she could sense the eyes on her. Some were sympathetic, others just curious. Ruby clenched her jaw, refusing to let embarrassment overwhelm her. "I have a flight to catch. I have a business summit to speak at. Let's keep going." But a small voice in her head kept nagging that this wasn't over. People like Jared never let things go so easily. Boarding for her flight was underway when Ruby reached the gate. She was one of the last first-class passengers to check in, primarily due to the delay Jared caused. The gate agent, a cheerful older woman named Lorraine, took Ruby's boarding pass without fuss. She offered a warm smile. "Have a pleasant flight, Miss Anderson," she said, handing back the documents with professional grace. The contrast to Jared's hostility was refreshing. Ruby settled into her first-class seat, letting out a heavy sigh. The plush cushion and generous legroom offered temporary solace. She tucked her carry-on beneath the seat, then powered on her tablet to review her speech for the London summit. She had spent weeks crafting talking points on innovation, diversity, and the future of technology. It was set to be a momentous event, one where she planned to announce a bold initiative in partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, focused on bridging the digital divide in under-resourced communities worldwide. This partnership was a culmination of Ruby's vision and her unwavering drive to make technology accessible to everyone. The irony that she had just been detained under suspicion, as though she didn't belong in the very spaces she helped shape, was not lost on her. The flight attendants began their safety demonstration, and Ruby tried to refocus, yet her mind drifted to her early childhood in a modest neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. She recalled her parents' unwavering belief in her potential. They saved every penny to send her to a decent private school, reminding her daily that she could become anything. She worked tirelessly through college, majoring in computer science at Stanford, often feeling like an outsider in predominantly white and male spaces. The memories of those microaggressions, those side glances doubting her capability, came rushing back. That feeling of having to work twice as hard to prove she belonged. The baggage of prejudice was a heavy load, and she had carried it for decades. She had grown adept at navigating these obstacles, but that never erased the sting. Now, here she was, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, recognized on magazine covers, invited to speak at global summits. Still, one random airline manager had the power to reduce her to a suspect, a question mark, an anomaly. Ruby inhaled deeply, letting the cool, conditioned airplane air fill her lungs. Her mother used to say, "Rise above, but never forget." She was determined to do exactly that. She opened her email to confirm final details with the Gates Foundation coordinator. A flurry of messages greeted her, but one subject line stood out regarding security incident at airport. Heart-pounding, she clicked it. An unknown sender had found her corporate email address, no doubt gleaned from the fiasco at the airport or possibly from the nameplate on her luggage. The email read, "Miss Anderson, the first recorded what happened at the check-in counter. Would you like me to send you the footage? I believe it shows a clear example of racial profiling. I think it might be important for you to have a copy. Contact me if you're interested." Lucas Ruby felt a surge of mixed emotions, gratitude for the compassion of a stranger, anger that she needed evidence for something so blatantly unjust, and curiosity about what that footage might reveal. She made a mental note to respond once she landed in London. For now, she simply needed to rest and prepare. As the plane began its ascent, she couldn't shake the premonition that this was just the opening act of a larger drama about to unfold. Part of her wanted to turn the other cheek, to stay focused on her philanthropic mission and let the incident recede into the background. But deep down, Ruby knew that the moral arc of justice sometimes required individuals to stand up and make an example of wrongdoing. She wouldn't seek vengeance, but if life placed an opportunity for accountability before her, she wouldn't sidestep it. The next chapters of this unfolding story would not simply be about personal vindication, but about shining a bright light on the biases that still lurked in the shadows of corporate culture and beyond. After the long transatlantic flight, Ruby touched down in London. She navigated the city's bustling Heathrow Airport, a swirl of British accents, travelers from around the world, and the typical chaos of arrivals. The crisp, damp air of London greeted her as she stepped into a chauffeured car arranged by her corporate team. Despite her lingering frustration, she was determined not to let the airport incident overshadow the monumental significance of her upcoming summit appearance. London's skyline welcomed her with its blend of historic architecture and contemporary high-rises. The driver smoothly maneuvered through busy streets until they arrived at the Langham, a luxurious hotel in the heart of the city. Ruby thanked the driver and quickly checked in. Her suite was an elegant space with tall windows overlooking a slice of Regency architecture. She exhaled, setting her luggage in the corner and quickly showering away the exhaustion of travel. Her phone buzzed with notifications. One was from her executive assistant, Kelly, with a flurry of updates, final meeting schedules, press interview requests, and messages from philanthropic partners, including a personal welcome note from a representative at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Another was from a corporate communications director wanting to confirm the details of a major press release about the new digital literacy program Oakwood Innovations was spearheading. But there, sandwiched between the work emails, was a follow-up from Lucas, the young journalist. He wrote that he had posted a short clip of the incident to a private social media account and that some people were urging him to go public. He asked for Ruby's perspective. Did she want the video released widely? Did she want to remain anonymous? Ruby tapped her phone, considering her response carefully. She typed, "Lucas, thank you for reaching out. Let's talk in detail before you make it public. I'm free tomorrow after the summit keynote. I'll send you a link to schedule a quick call." Ruby Anderson, satisfied with the measured response. She turned off her phone for a moment, letting silence envelop her. She needed to focus on the speech she was giving the next day. As she rehearsed her lines in front of the mirror, she caught a glimpse of the steely determination in her eyes. That old fire within her was burning bright again, the same force that propelled her to break through every barrier in her path. That night, she slept fitfully. Scenes from the airport played out in her dreams, interspersed with memories of the boardroom triumphs that had shaped her life. She woke early, feeling not just tired but resolute. She decided she would address what happened, perhaps not during her keynote, but soon. The world had to hear that prejudice was still alive and well, even in places claiming to champion diversity. And if that truth made some people uncomfortable, then so be it. Growth never occurred without discomfort. The London Technology and Innovation Summit was held in a sprawling convention centre near the city's business district. The venue buzzed with energy. Hundreds of tech professionals, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and dignitaries mingled among futuristic displays of artificial intelligence, cutting-edge software, and advanced robotics. Ruby arrived early, accompanied by Kelly. Cameras flashed, microphones hovered, and event staff scurried to finalize every detail. Ruby was scheduled to speak just before lunchtime. As the final speaker in the morning session, the crowd would be primed and attentive. She had honed her speech to highlight not only Oakwood Innovation's achievements, but also the moral imperatives behind her philanthropic work. With polished slides and heartfelt stories, she would reveal the new digital literacy initiative meant to empower underserved communities. However, a jarring surprise awaited her. As she scanned the crowd from the backstage vantage point, she spotted a face she never expected to see, Jared Hilton. At first, she doubted her eyes, but there he was, wearing a visitor's badge and an ill-fitting sports jacket, seemingly engrossed in the conference proceedings. Her mind raced. Why is he here? Is he following me? Or is this just a bizarre coincidence? She felt a sudden jolt of anxiety. The memory of his sneer, his baseless accusations, replayed in her head. Part of her wanted to confront him immediately, to ask what he was doing at a private, invitation-only summit. Had he found a way to intrude further into her life? But she had to maintain her composure. Soon she would be stepping onto the stage in front of thousands, and the last thing she needed was to be rattled by a man whose bigotry had already taken too much of her peace. Steadying her nerves, Ruby turned her attention to Kelly. "Can you discreetly find out why that man is here?" She subtly gestured toward Jared's direction. Kelly nodded, stepping away with her phone at the ready. Moments later, she returned, looking baffled. He registered as a representative from Transway Airlines. "I guess the airline has a small booth here promoting new in-flight Wi-Fi tech, but I'll dig more." Ruby frowned. Of all the coincidences, the same airline manager who doubted her identity was now at a summit focusing on technological advancements, presumably forging partnerships for new in-flight solutions. The world was indeed small and sometimes ironically twisted. An usher approached to inform Ruby she would be on stage in 10 minutes. She took a steadying breath and aligned her focus. "I will not let him derail me. This is my moment." She walked to the stage entrance, feeling the presence of her parents' spirit, her mentor's guidance, and her own unwavering determination fueling her every step. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, but she welcomed the adrenaline. When the event organizer introduced her with a rousing mention of her accolades, Fortune 500 CEO, visionary leader, philanthropic champion, the audience erupted in applause. Ruby stepped on stage to thunderous clapping. The spotlight haloed her figure, and the hush that followed was electric. She launched into her talk, weaving together personal anecdotes and big-picture visions, painting a tapestry of hope for what technology could do when guided by empathy and inclusivity. From the podium, she glanced fleetingly toward Jared. His face was inscrutable, but he was clearly listening. Ruby felt a spark of defiance. "Watch me," she thought. "Watch me do what you never believed I could." She pressed forward, describing how her partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation would equip thousands of schools in low-income neighborhoods with cutting-edge digital resources. She spoke of bridging the digital divide, ensuring that talent and intellect, regardless of background, could flourish. She ended her speech with a resounding call for moral responsibility in tech, urging every business leader in the room to see beyond the bottom line. The applause was overwhelming. People rose to their feet in a standing ovation, some with tears in their eyes. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the triumphant expression on Ruby's face. At that moment, all the slights she'd endured paled in comparison to the sense of purpose radiating from this stage. As she stepped backstage, a flurry of congratulatory well-wishers surrounded her, offering handshakes and warm praise. Kelly beamed, tears glistening. News outlets rushed in for interviews. A part of Ruby longed for a moment to compose herself, but she gave gracious quotes and agreed to meet the press. Yet, out of the corner of her eye, she saw Jared hovering near the edge of the crowd. Their gazes locked briefly. She expected him to look deflated, maybe even remorseful, but instead his expression was something else, something unreadable, tinged perhaps with cold determination. For a split second, a ripple of unease ran through her. Then someone tapped her shoulder, asking for a photo. She turned away, letting the swirl of the event carry her onward. Late in the afternoon, after final press interviews, Ruby paused near a row of exhibit booths to check her phone. Behind her, a voice said, "Impressive speech." She spun around to face Jared Hilton standing awkwardly close. "I'm busy," she said tersely. Jared raised his hands. "Hey, can't I congratulate you?" She eyed him. "I doubt that's all you want." He swallowed, looking uneasy. "About the airport? You mean when you humiliated me and dragged me to security?" Ruby's voice was calm but sharp. He tried to shrug it off. "I was doing my job, airline fraud, identity checks." "Stop," she cut in. "We both know it was bias." His cheeks flushed, but then he lowered his voice. "I'm here on short notice because Transway wants new in-flight tech. We're behind the competition, and your company is on our shortlist." Ruby felt a flash of disbelief. The same man who doubted her now needed her help. "You could have gone through my team." she said coldly. He shrugged, contrite. I messed up. I'm hoping we can start fresh for business. A cynical laugh escaped her. You expect me to ignore what happened just because you suddenly need my tech? I'm sorry, Jared mumbled, sounding desperate. I at least have to try. Ruby crossed her arms, scanning his face. She found a mix of shame and panic. I'll forward your request to business development, she said, but don't expect my personal endorsement. He nodded, defeated. Understood. Thanks. Ruby turned away, adrenaline pumping. The man who had belittled her now begged for her favor, yet another ironic twist in her life. She left without looking back, determined to protect both her dignity and her company's greater mission. After the summit, Ruby's schedule brimmed with media interviews. Most reporters stuck to questions about her keynote, her philanthropic collaborations, and her company's next big innovations. However, a sharp-eyed reporter from a popular online news site cornered her with a different question. Miss Anderson, we're hearing rumors about an incident at Chicago O'Hare before your flight. Something to do with racial profiling? Any comments? Ruby stiffened. She glanced at Kelly, who gave her a subtle nod, indicating it was up to Ruby whether to speak or not. A hush fell over the makeshift press area. Ruby chose her words with care. I did have an unfortunate experience with an airline employee who questioned my identification. The matter has been resolved, and I'm focusing on the summit and our new initiative, but it does highlight how biases can still be pervasive, even in professional settings. The reporter latched on. Are you saying you were racially profiled? Ruby hesitated. She hated making headlines about racial discrimination, fearing it might overshadow her genuine work. Yet honesty compelled her. I'm saying that the interaction suggested as much. Yes, it's an ongoing conversation about fairness, equity, and the assumptions people make based on appearance. The next day, headlines splashed across tech news sites and social media channels. Fortune 500 CEO speaks out on racial bias at airport, and tech leader Ruby Anderson reveals pre-summit incident. Biases are still pervasive. While her philanthropic announcements were still garnering positive press, a parallel wave of attention fixated on her airport ordeal. Journalists clamored for details, while civil rights groups praised her willingness to speak up. Among the swirling online chatter, one person was conspicuously silent: Jared Hilton. Ruby found herself occasionally scanning social media to see if he'd made any statement or if Transway Airlines had responded. Nothing. But behind the scenes, Lucas had sent her a link to the video he'd recorded. It clearly showed the moment Jared questioned her ID, the condescending tone, and the crowd's murmurs. Kelly texted Ruby, "We should consider releasing the video, or at least confirming it. The public pressure might push the airline to address this formally." Ruby weighed her options. Part of her believed that the negative PR could force Transway to acknowledge the issue. Another part fretted that sensationalism could overshadow her philanthropic endeavors. Her philanthropic mission was not a stepping stone for personal vendettas. Then again, standing up publicly against such discrimination was an integral part of her broader fight for inclusivity. If she stayed silent, how many more people would experience the same ordeal without recourse? Meanwhile, back in the United States, news of Ruby's statement was beginning to reach the corridors of Transway Airlines corporate offices. The airline's legal team and PR department scrambled to address media inquiries. They had no official statement yet because, according to their internal logs, no formal complaint had been filed by Ruby Anderson. They questioned Jared, who admitted to the confrontation but tried to downplay it. An emergency boardroom meeting convened at Transway's headquarters. Executives huddled around a long mahogany table, reviewing the video that Lucas provided to them anonymously. The grainy footage was enough to make them cringe. Their brand might not have the global cachet of the largest carriers, but they still prided themselves on respectable customer service. The last thing they needed was a major scandal with a high-profile CEO who was also recognized for her philanthropic work. She is a Fortune 500 CEO, hissed one of the PR managers. If she goes nuclear on us publicly, we'll face a major backlash. We need to contain this. Is there any chance to salvage a business deal with her company? Asked the head of it partnerships. We can't let Jared's mistakes ruin our chance to secure next generation in flight tech. The legal counsel leaned forward, adopting a cautious tone. First, we should issue an apology. Then we offered to meet with Miss Anderson privately, show that we take this seriously. The CEO of Transway, a silver-haired man named Gregory Shaw, stroked his chin in contemplation. If we handle this poorly, it could blow up in our faces. But if we manage it well, we might not only mitigate damage, but also preserve a potential partnership. They all turned to Jared, who sat stiffly in a chair at the far end of the table. His face was pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He had hoped the ordeal would remain an isolated incident, overshadowed by the summit's other news. Instead, it was now a burning spotlight. Gregory Shaw fixed him with a cold stare. You need to fix this, Jared. If we lose a valuable tech partnership and end up with a racial discrimination scandal, your days here might be numbered. Jared swallowed hard, knowing a storm was brewing that could uproot his career. He clung to a faint hope that Ruby might take the high road. But if the headlines were any indication, she was already speaking out. He tried to recall that conversation at the summit. Her final words to him, "Don't expect anything from me personally." You lost that right. He realized in that moment that his own biases might cost him not just a business deal, but also his entire professional trajectory. Across the Atlantic in her London hotel suite, Ruby held a virtual meeting with Oakwood Innovations' legal and PR teams, all huddled in a bright boardroom back in Chicago. She explained the situation, showed them the video, and relayed the possibility of releasing it to the public. A spirited discussion ensued. Miss Anderson, this could bring negative backlash on Transway, but it might also intensify the media spotlight on you, cautioned PR manager Sarah Byrne. We don't want your philanthropic endeavors overshadowed by a racial profiling scandal. Legal counsel Jordan Reeves added, we should also consider potential repercussions. Transway might deny wrongdoing if they see it as a threat, but realistically the video is quite damning. They'll likely want to settle or apologize. Ruby listened intently. She had dealt with crises before, cyber attacks, data breaches, stock dips, but this was different. This was personal. Yet, as CEO, she had a responsibility to weigh the company's interests too. Let's keep all options on the table, she said finally. I'm not looking for a lawsuit, but I do want a public acknowledgement that this behavior is unacceptable. Let's see if Transway reaches out. In the meantime, Lucas has given me permission to release the video whenever we see fit. I'll hold it for now. They adjourned, leaving Ruby to ponder the next move. Part of her felt a sense of satisfaction. He can't just walk away from this. But she also felt the heavy burden of representation. Many people of color had faced similar or worse discrimination, yet didn't have her platform. She wanted to handle this in a way that could drive positive change, not simply punish one individual. She wrestled with that ethical conundrum, deciding to get some rest. Ruby returned to Chicago a few days later, her London trip a whirlwind of success, despite the unresolved tension with Transway. She was greeted at O'Hare with more courtesy than she had ever received. Airport staff made sure everything went smoothly. She couldn't help but suspect they had been briefed about who she was and the brewing controversy. At Oakwood Innovations headquarters, a gleaming tower with an open concept design, her staff welcomed her like a returning champion. Balloons and a large poster board reading "Congrats on a great summit" adorned the lobby. Kelly handed her a latte and a folder filled with meeting briefs. It's Good to have you back. We have a long day ahead, though, Kelly noted wryly. Ruby nodded. Let's tackle it. The day zoomed by in a blur of debriefings, departmental updates, and strategic planning for the philanthropic initiative. Toward late afternoon, Kelly knocked on Ruby's office door. Transway's CEO, Gregory Shaw, is online too. He'd like to arrange a meeting at your convenience. Ruby raised her eyebrows, so they finally reached out. She let out a slow breath. All right, I'll take it. She picked up the phone, adjusting her posture. Mr. Shaw, good afternoon, she began, maintaining an even tone. Miss Anderson, thank you for taking my call. Shaw sounded polite, if not a bit anxious. I'd like to formally apologize for the incident with our employee. We take matters of respect and fairness seriously at Transway. We are willing to meet with you to discuss how we can make this right. Ruby appreciated the directness. I'm open to discussing it, but I need to be clear. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. It was racial profiling. I can't just sweep that under the rug. Shaw cleared his throat. I understand. We'd like to propose a face-to-face meeting, perhaps at your headquarters. We'd also like to talk about exploring a partnership with Oakwood Innovations for our in-flight tech upgrades. If you're open to that, we can discuss next steps and also address the airport incident. We want to show our sincerity in remedying the situation. Ruby's mind churned. Part of her was gratified to see them taking the matter seriously. But she also sensed they might be more motivated by preserving a potential partnership than by genuine remorse. Still, if she could push for tangible, systemic changes at Transway diversity training, revised protocols, then maybe some good could come out of this fiasco. She replied calmly, I'll make some time next week. My assistant will coordinate with your office. The conversation ended cordially. Ruby exhaled, feeling the weight of the upcoming showdown. She knew it wasn't just about her. It was about challenging a larger culture that allowed bias to fester. A week later, Transway's delegation arrived at Oakwood Innovations headquarters. Gregory Shaw led the group, followed by a couple of executives, and, to Ruby's private dismay, Jared Hilton. Dressed in a crisp suit, Jared looked subdued, even contrite, though a flicker of tension remained in his eyes. Ruby's leadership team joined her in a spacious conference room with glass walls overlooking the Chicago skyline. Modern art pieces and potted plants gave the space a progressive vibe. As soon as everyone settled, Ruby wasted no time. I appreciate Transway's willingness to address the airport incident, she began. Before we discuss any potential technology partnerships, I want to know how you plan to ensure that what happened to me doesn't happen to others. Shaw spoke first. We plan on implementing robust anti-discrimination training for all our employees, starting from the managerial level. We'll refine our identification verification protocols to prevent subjective bias, and we're open to hearing any other suggestions you might have. The sincerity in his voice seemed genuine, or at least well-rehearsed. Ruby nodded. I also want a written apology from Transway acknowledging the incident as profiling, not just for me, but as a statement that you won't tolerate such behavior in the future. Shaw agreed, though he looked slightly uneasy. Yes, we can do that. We'd like to release a joint statement emphasizing mutual respect and a forward-looking partnership, if that's acceptable to you. Ruby glanced at her own PR manager, who gave a subtle thumbs up. She then turned her attention to Jared. She hadn't spoken a word to him yet. The rest of the room seemed to sense the tension. Jared swallowed and cleared his throat. Miss Anderson, I want to apologize personally. I was wrong to question your ID the way I did. She held up a hand, stopping him. I don't need a long explanation. Acknowledgement of wrongdoing and a promise to improve is enough. Just be aware that I won't forget what happened. People without my visibility and resources face this every day. Use this as a lesson." Jared lowered his gaze. "I understand." With that, the tension in the room eased, replaced by a more pragmatic atmosphere. They spent the next hour discussing potential in-flight systems Oakwood Innovations could provide, from advanced Wi-Fi to seatback screens with educational content. Ruby's staff outlined the features, costs, and projected timelines. The synergy seemed promising. Transway needed to modernize, while Oakwood Innovations was capable of delivering a top-notch experience. At the end of the meeting, they drafted a preliminary memorandum of understanding. It was not a final contract, but a statement of intent. Most crucially, the document contained language about the importance of diversity and equal treatment of all passengers. Ruby insisted on including it, and Transway reluctantly agreed. As the Transway team departed, Gregory Shaw extended his hand. "Thank you, Miss Anderson. I hope this is the start of a new chapter." She shook it, her gaze unwavering. "Let's ensure it is." For a few weeks, the airport incident seemed to settle into the background of broader news cycles. The joint statement was released, and mainstream media picked up brief mentions of Ruby's experience, praising her willingness to stand up against discrimination. On social media, the story remained a hot topic, with many lauding Ruby's poised response. Ruby herself was content to shift her focus back to the philanthropic venture. However, trouble loomed for Jared Hilton. Within Transway, rumors circulated that the company's leadership no longer trusted him to handle sensitive customer-facing situations. Some employees whispered that a scapegoat was needed, and Jared fit the bill. Others believed it was a direct result of Ruby's stance that meaningful change would only occur if the airline dealt with employees who engaged in biased behavior. By the time the internal review concluded, Jared found himself demoted to a lesser role with significantly reduced responsibilities. He felt humiliated, seething at the perceived injustice of it all. In the break room, he overheard colleagues gossiping about how he had picked on the wrong person, mocking his downfall with wry chuckles. The once proud manager was now a symbol of corporate miscalculation. One evening, after clearing his desk in his smaller, windowless new office, Jared checked his email and found a memo from HR scheduling another performance review. The official reason was ambiguous, but he suspected this was the final step before they let him go. A cold sweat broke out across his forehead. Losing this job meant losing his steady income, his sense of status, the life he had carved out for himself. He made a desperate decision. He would write a long email to Ruby, apologizing again and begging for her intervention. Perhaps if she convinced Transway that he was worth keeping, he could salvage his career. So, late that night, heart pounding, he typed, "Miss Anderson, I know this may be asking a lot after everything that happened, but please hear me out." He hit send and waited, feeling the creeping shame of having to plead for mercy from the very person he had wronged. When Ruby saw Jared's email, her first reaction was surprise. She read through the lengthy plea, which described how he was on the brink of termination. He invoked family responsibilities, explaining that his wife was pregnant, that he needed the health insurance, that he had learned a hard lesson and was willing to attend any training necessary. It was a raw, vulnerable confession. Ruby leaned back in her office chair, exhaling slowly. She empathized on a human level. Losing a job could be catastrophic, especially with a family on the way. But she also remembered the humiliating corridor at the airport, the scorn in Jared's eyes. If she intervened, would that truly lead to growth, or would it merely reward him for seeking out her forgiveness only after his career was on the line? She called Kelly into her office. "Read this," she said, handing over the printed email. Kelly scanned it, her expression reflecting a mix of anger and pity. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Ruby pressed her lips together. I want to help him be a better person, but I also don't want to shield him from the consequences of his actions. Is it my responsibility to save him from his own prejudice? Does he deserve that kind of leniency?" Kelly hesitated. "You've already done so much by not releasing the video widely, by focusing on systemic fixes instead of personal vengeance. Maybe the airline's HR process should play out." Ruby nodded. "I'll think it over. Maybe I'll talk to Gregory Shaw. If Jared is willing to do real anti-bias training and acknowledges the harm, maybe he can be reassigned. But I won't be blackmailed into ensuring he keeps his job. This has to be the airline's decision." She composed a measured reply to Jared. "Mr. Hilton, I've received your email. I understand your predicament. However, this is a matter between you and Transway's HR department. I've expressed my concerns about your conduct, as well as the need for fair, unbiased treatment of passengers, to your company's leadership. I encourage you to fully cooperate with their internal processes and demonstrate your willingness to change. I wish you the best." She hit send and closed her laptop, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. This was not about revenge, it was about accountability. A few days later, Ruby's phone rang with a call from Gregory Shaw. He informed her that Jared had officially parted ways with Transway, a mutual decision that fit best for all parties. He had also requested that Transway pass along a final apology to Ruby. Shaw sounded relieved that the chapter was closed, clearing the path for a smooth partnership with Oakwood Innovations. Ruby hung up, ruminating on the turn of events. She felt neither triumph nor pity, just a sense of closure. Jared's downfall was a stark reminder of what prejudice could cost, but Ruby also hoped that he would genuinely learn and grow from this. Sometimes hard lessons were the only path toward real change. With the airport incident largely resolved, Ruby focused her energies on the philanthropic initiative. Yet she realized the story could serve a broader purpose. She reached out to Lucas, the young journalist, who was eager to share his footage responsibly. Together, they agreed to publish a short documentary piece highlighting not only Ruby's experience, but also the broader issue of racial profiling in travel. In the documentary, Ruby spoke candidly about her ordeal, but also about how the conversation needed to shift toward solutions. She showcased Oakwood Innovations' new program that brought technology to underserved communities, bridging divides and empowering individuals. The video was released on a popular social media platform and quickly went viral. Comments poured in. Many praised Ruby for her grace and leadership, while others shared their own stories of discrimination. Advocacy groups seized on the momentum, using the documentary to push airlines into adopting clearer, more equitable policies. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation even linked the video to their official blog, citing Ruby's experience as an example of why inclusive attitudes are crucial at every level of society. In a single week, the video racked up millions of views, turning Ruby into a symbol of resilience and purposeful leadership. Interviews with major networks followed. She used every platform to steer the conversation toward constructive solutions, urging policymakers and corporations alike to prioritize diversity training and accountability. For her, it was never about personal vendetta, but about illuminating how systemic prejudice could be dismantled piece by piece by those with the courage to confront it. Months passed, and the partnership between Transway Airlines and Oakwood Innovations proceeded smoothly. Passengers on select Transway flights began to enjoy improved Wi-Fi and interactive seatback screens featuring educational content. The airline publicly announced a zero-tolerance policy on discrimination and shared internal training updates. Meanwhile, Ruby's philanthropic initiative with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation rolled out in stages. providing digital resources to schools across economically challenged regions. Photos circulated of children learning computer coding on laptops that Oakwood Innovations donated, accompanied by teachers trained to guide them. The success was staggering. Test scores improved, student engagement soared, and a new generation of tech-savvy youth began to envision careers that once seemed out of reach. As for Jared Hilton, rumors emerged that he'd taken a job at a much smaller airline in a back-office role, presumably licking his wounds. Whether he had truly learned his lesson remained uncertain, but for Ruby, that chapter had closed. She had no desire to dwell on it. She had bigger dreams to chase. Standing in front of a newly built community tech center in Cleveland, one of many planned expansions, Ruby breathed in the crisp air. She smiled as she saw children running inside, eager to explore the brand-new tablets and coding software. Parents thanked her and the volunteers profusely. In those shining faces, she saw the future, a future where a child's potential was determined not by skin color or privilege, but by access to opportunities and the unwavering belief that they could achieve anything. Ruby Anderson was no longer merely a Fortune 500 CEO. She had become a beacon, a living testament to the power of resilience, empathy, and action. Her story underscored that sometimes adversity offered the chance for a greater good, a chance to break chains of prejudice, not just for oneself, but for generations to come. Thank you for taking this dramatic journey with us. Ruby Anderson's story reminds us that sometimes the biggest challenges come from the smallest actions, like a glance at an ID or a judgment passed in an airport corridor. Yet her unbreakable spirit and commitment to uplift others turned prejudice into purpose. She refused to be anyone's victim, using every platform from a London keynote stage to a viral video to spark meaningful change. In the end, Ruby's experience became a rallying cry for fairness, innovation, and equal opportunity. If you found her story inspiring, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Spread the word, and let's keep sparking important conversations that move us all toward a more inclusive future. By amplifying stories like this one, we can shape a world where potential knows no boundaries and where respect is the universal currency. Thank you for watching and supporting our content.